Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It's okay, Harley. I'm only on volume 16. Actually, I finished reading volume 16 in one night. Well, day, actually. I spent the whole day reading it. But yeah. Yeah, the manga is apparently the worst adaptation. So there you go. No, you can read the manga. Okay, so Harley, there is bad news. We're no longer putting these up on the website. So when they vanish from Twitch, they're gone. So I don't know what to tell you. We're 3 volumes, so like a couple of months past you. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to tell you. Ugh. But they're still up on Twitch for later, so if you find the old ones and you want to check those out, go for it. But I don't know how long it's been. That's okay. You own them. That's good. That's good. I do too. Clearly. But yeah, you just have to read it yourself. Well, up to a certain amount. Let's see. Let me check real quick where we are in the videos. How far back are we now? Oh wow, it doesn't not much. Not much at all, huh? Oh no, okay, we've got several of these. Okay, cool. So, okay, so some of these are expiring soon. A student arrives looking for Rudius. Is he friend or foe? A new student arrives. Okay, that's the. Oh, okay, so that is. How old is this? Okay, so volume 9, chapters 3 through 6 is going to go away in a few days. That's where we're at. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's where we're at. So you'll probably have to finish volume 9 and try and do it soon. If you want to watch these and try and catch up. So, yeah, dude. Sorry about that. Maybe I should put up like a thing. Hold on. Let me add. Let me see if I can add. Let me put an image up here. T. Bam. Okay, where do I have? Oh, it's unabridged. Yes. In light novels. There we are. Highlight. Jobless. Oh. Well, that's I don't have. I don't have volume. I'm just gonna. For now, I'm just taking that and moving that over. And okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have. Okay, so since we're on volume 11, Mushoku Tensei volume 11 images. Okay, I need to save images. Instead of games, go to. Oh no, it's a freaking. I hate when they do that. Okay, copy image. Oh man, really? See, this is so stupid. Save, not link. Save image. And it's a web image. Oh, I hate those. I hate when it happens like that.
Congratulations on
Up.
graduating from a Dave. Though that is basically just getting a participation
Ah,
trophy.
Rage. Thank you for the sub. Appreciate it. Unless it was a gift sub in which. Oh no! Thank you for the prime. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Ha. Okay, so I'm just trying to find a decent image of volume 11. To put up on the screen over there instead of. Okay. Open image. Save image. Why is it a web thing? This is so dumb. It's way too small right there. Okay, let me copy the image, and I'll just do a stupid Photoshop thing then. Might as well just do a dumb old Photoshop thing, so I can actually put the correct volume up. See, if I put the volumes up on here correctly, then it's like, then people know where we're at. So maybe I'll just start doing that. New. Gotcha. Control B. Now I save as. I'm in the right place. Nice. Double S. Okay. Cool. No. Okay. So there. Now I have changed it to, instead of 7, I changed it to 11. Cool. And okay, so instead of putting it there, like that's way too giant. There we are. And that makes things a little bit easier. Now everybody kind of knows, you know, what volume we're on. I can put it. There we go. Oh no. Oh no. Gosh darn it. Stop it. There. This way I can put the cup over. I mean, good there. Yeah. Trying to find a decent place for it. That's the point. All right, there we are. Ha Huzzah! Okay, so I don't need this really anymore. I'm gonna be getting a flat cap soon, so not so shiny up here. By the way, if anybody wants to help me with the keeps sponsorship, I will greatly appreciate it. But I don't think I have enough people viewing stuff for that. So yeah, as I talked about earlier, I checked out volume 16 of Mushoku Tensei. That is out right now on digital only. It comes out next month in paperback, and the other half of things are, let's see, volume 17 is available for pre-order on paperback only. It's not available yet in digital for pre-order, at least on Amazon, which is where I get everything on my Kindle. But yeah, dude, that's where we're at on that specifically. Specifically. There we go. Much better. Okay, cool. Wait, why am I? Dear Lord. Dear Lloyd. See, I got that background right there now, and it's just a little shade of annoying. It's just 3 shades of annoying. And there we are. Much better. Much better. All right. So, as you guys can see, we got a lot to cover. All right. So, 4 through 6 is where we're going today. Let me go to Table of contents. Okay, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, we don't have any extra chapters this time, so it literally is 4, 5, and 6. We'll just jump through it. Once again, guys, I did 25 push-ups before we started. I'm also gonna shave. I did 25 push-ups before we started, so that's where I'm at right now. Just because I was like, I need to do some exercise. Um, but yeah, gang, that's where we are at the moment. But if you would like to help me get thinner, exercise is always welcome. I mean, my diet is very much a part of it. This morning, I got up, showered, dog out, so I got some walking done. A little bit of walking, not a lot. But I did some walking, and then from there on, I uh, I had a little fried egg sandwich, which basically means I fried one egg, put the egg in, broke the yolk, fried the egg, put that on a tortilla, like a very thin tortilla, a little small one, with a slice of cheese. Uh, I'm gonna start staying away from processed cheese. That's another thing. I'm gonna start getting my cheese from the deli, and we're gonna shred it or slice it to fit whatever. So we're gonna have our own cheese because apparently that's a lot better than just getting processed sliced cheese or shredded cheese and stuff like that. So that's what we're gonna start doing. That's apparently better for you, and a lot of where my belly is at is coming from processed cheese. So, yeah, learn some more new stuff. I had a wonderful conversation with my nutritionist, and they also pointed out that I can have canned fruits. Again, I was aware that I was only able to have frozen fruits, but no, you can have canned fruits. You just have to pour all the syrupy stuff out and maybe do a light rinse of whatever you're gonna have, especially if they're like pears and stuff. You know, because they sit in that really sugary, syrupy stuff, and you want to make sure that you don't have a lot of that sugary, syrupy junk with your canned fruits. So that's something that's important. Also, with vegetables, kind of the same thing, except it's more sodium. So, like when I do the vegetable soups and stuff, and we're getting like our canned veggies, we'll pour out the liquid that's sitting in there with the canned veggies, and then we'll pour our veggies. I mean, yes, fresh veggies are always better if you can do it that way. But we're not doing fresh spinach, and we're not doing fresh corn, and we're not doing fresh green beans. We're just those three things. But the diced tomatoes and the tomato paste, like that, and you don't really have to worry about that. But everything else, the celery, the potatoes, the garlic, the onion, all that's 100% fresh, certified fresh. That having been said, I have talked enough about food and nutrition and all that things. But Rage and I are both working on that, so who knows? 224 was my new weight last time, and that is the heaviest I've ever been. So I need to go back down. Because believe it or not, I used to be 139 when I was in the military, and I was like yoked. Well, not yoked, but like when I was in much better shape, where I had visible definition and good musculature. So we're working on that. That having been said, I just wanted to give you guys a quick update about what's going on with me. And lastly, the next update going on for Fat Dog Stuff. We are finalizing the script for the Patreon ad. I have to wash my lab coat because I got stuff all over it. I got freaking salsa all over it because I dropped something on the chicken salsa yesterday. And it splattered everywhere. And of course, it got on my lab coat. Because I wear that coat all the time. I love that thing. But yeah, got the lab coat, did that. And then we start recording for Slime 9 next week, and we will start casting. Got some new voices that we're going to be adding to this volume because we got to get all the kids voiced. We got to get Yuki cast, and we got to cast Ramirez. It's a whole thing. It is a whole ass thing. All right, anyway. That having been said, we have caught up on Fat Dog stuff, we've caught up on me stuff, and we've caught up on Twitch stuff. So I think it's time for us to jump back into Mushoku Tensei. So we're going to start back up where we left off at the beginning of chapter 4 of volume 11, as it says there. Yeah, it says right there. There? There. Yeah. Looks like I'm pointing in front of me. So kind of point toward the light right there. Yeah. Looks like, or if I point, no, if I point at the TV, it's not the same. So if I point at my light, volume 11. Go check out volume. Yeah. It's cheaper digitally. That's all I'm saying. All right. Here we go. Chapter 4, A Brother's Feelings. Oh, for those that do not remember how we left off, I'll go ahead and nope. That because I just realized something. Okay, go to. Okay, I'm just gonna. I consider you a good friend. Nice. The Boston is funky. Oh wow, it went way too far past. Okay. Oh, so it was actually a brother. Okay. So Norn had shut herself in her room, and that was the last thing that we got before we left off. Remember, if you would like for me to exercise and you want me to get in shape, go ahead and post that while I'm reading. Those will be tallied up by the mods, and they will let me know at the end of each chapter how much I owe, and I will do all of those at the end of the chapter. Now, I only do 40 exercises per chapter, so if you're going to hit me with a bunch of exercises, that's cool, but no more than 40. So once you see that one particular exercise is at 40, try and pick another exercise because if you add more, that's not going to happen this time. That'll carry over to the next time. I'll only do 40 at a time. All right. Thank you. Chapter 4, A Brother's Feelings. I learned about the situation as I headed to school with Sylphie one morning. Lily and Persenna were waiting outside the gates for me. As soon as they saw us approaching, they ran over and explained that Norn had shut herself in her room the day before and was refusing to come out. I'm going to go take a look. I'm going to go take a look. Sylphie was off and running towards the girls' dormitory pretty much instantly. On the other hand, I was frozen in place. She'd probably have been following my wife, but the news had thrown me into a state of panic. The word shut in had a very heavy connotations for me, I guess. Aren't you gonna go too, boss? You just gonna ignore this? I didn't know what to say. What was I going to do? What was I supposed to do? My mind was blank. In my case, it had all been over the minute I locked myself in my room. I'd stayed a shut in for the rest of my life. Did I ever come back out? Because I thought the outside because I thought the outside world was a dangerous why did I never come back out? Because I thought the outside world was a dangerous place full of people who wanted to do me harm. I thought I'd be bullied again if I went back to school. Yeah. It was the bullying that started it. I knew that'd make me miserable all over again if I ever tried to emerge from my isolation. I had to address the cause of Norton's behavior if I wanted to change. Before I tried to coax her out, I had to figure out the reason she was hiding in her room. A memory of my past flashed through my mind. I was in a cafeteria at my old school, standing patiently in line. But just as it was finally my turn, a bunch of scary looking punks barged in ahead of me, full of righteous anger. I stupidly decided to take a stand up for myself. I lectured them loudly enough for everyone to hear, even as they sneered at me and told me to fuck off. I could see other students starting to glance over at us. Feeling increasingly proud of myself, I stubbornly pressed the issue, demanding an apology. Instead, they beat me viciously. By the time it was over, I thought they'd crippled me for life. That one mistake turned my life into a living hell. If there was any chance Norn was going through something similar right now, I needed to help her. I'd beat down the bullies who were harassing her until she felt safe again. Their friends or relatives might come after me later, but I'd deal with them, too, if I had to. I didn't care if they were rich aristocrats or even royalty. I'd fight them with everything I had. I'd make sure they lived to regret antagonizing me. There was a possibility Norn had set off the initial conflict, but whatever they were doing to her in response had obviously crossed the line. Norn was my sister. It didn't matter if she hated me and Aisha, or if she didn't want to live with us. She was still part of my family, and it's the big brother's job to protect his siblings, right? A few minutes later, I was striding down the hall toward the first year classrooms with Linny and Persenna following close behind me. I'd considered doing this by myself, but I didn't think my face was especially intimidating. At least, with these two standing next to me, everyone should recognize that I meant business. Boss? Don't, Linnea. Can't you see how mad he is? It's kind of scary. The two of them seemed a little dubious about this. That was understandable. I was dragging them into a seriously embarrassing situation, but right now I wasn't about to let my sense of
Sounds
shame
like
stop me.
someone could
Right
benefit
now, I
from
was in
some
full
of the
helicopter
youngsters'
parent mode.
nibbles.
Before long, we reached Norn's primary classroom. Homeroom was already underway. Excuse me, I said, throwing open the door and stepping right inside. Mr. Greyrat, we're in the middle of, like, a moment of everyone's time, if you don't mind. He really is in protective mode. Look at him right there. Yep. Big brother mode. All right. But it won't take long. Shouldering the professor out of the way, I took her place behind the podium. Before getting underway, I looked around the classroom. Everyone was staring up at me in surprise, but somewhere in this crowd, there had to be a bully who was picking on my sister. Had they punched her? Kicked her? Maybe they'd only insulted her for now. Maybe they just made fun of a sad, lonely little girl who was isolated in an unfamiliar city. What? Yeah, Rudy still doesn't remember that he's the most terrifying presence in school. Can you kiss my forehead? What? I mean, it's kind of like a six head if we're thinking about it, in terms of, yeah. Anyway. Uh, as I believe most of you know, one member of this class was absent yesterday. No one had anything to say about that. Oh, no one had anything to say to that. What you may not be aware of is that she's my little sister. That got a reaction. I heard murmurs from all around the classroom. I haven't heard the full details from my sister yet, but there aren't many reasons why a kid her age would stop coming to class. I think someone in this room is probably responsible. Whoa! I scanned the room as I spoke, looking for a reaction. A number of students looked down at their desks when I made eye contact with them. Most of these were tougher looking kids who were already starting to bend the dress code slightly. Did they have a guilty conscience, maybe? Looking more closely, I realized that one of them was the delinquent I'd met some time earlier. I couldn't remember his name off the top of my head. Could he have been the one? Slow down. It's too early to start jumping to conclusions. I don't expect much of those responsible, I said. Maybe they were just playing around or trying to get to know my sister and things took a weird turn. Maybe she provoked them somehow. I was watching every face in the classroom very closely now. Who was it? Who was bullying her? Is it that rich brat over there or maybe that sullen demon kid? No. It could just as easily be an ordinary girl. The average kids can be the nastiest bullies of all sometimes. I'd very much appreciate it if anyone involved would step up and admit it. I'm not going to yell at you. I just want you to recognize what you did and apologize to my sister. After that, I'll chop you into mincemeat. Some of the kids in this room were about as young as Norn, but the majority were older. Some were even in their late teens. There were probably at least a few who looked the other way. There was even a chance they'd all been in on it. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. For a few moments, no one said a word. Everyone just stared at me, their eyes wide with surprise. Finally, one girl in the group hesitantly raised her hand. It took some serious willpower to keep myself from firing off a stone cannon at her. She was beast folk, maybe 13 years old, who looked a bit like a raccoon dog. She had a round face, timid eyes, and a bob haircut. Not the kind of kid you'd expect to be a bully, honestly. It was easier to imagine her getting bullied, or her getting bullied. Was actually talking to Norn the other day, and you accidentally said something mean to her? As long as it was just a few nasty words, maybe I'd take it easy on her. No, no! It's just, I've heard a lot of stories about you, Mr. Grey Rat, but Norn's more of an ordinary girl, right? I just pointed out that you're pretty different from each other, and she got really mad at me. That didn't make any sense. Why would Norn get mad about that? She didn't want to be like me. She didn't even like me. Uh-oh. The professor, standing off to the side of the room, seemed to have remembered something. I turned my attention to her. At a glance, the woman looked like an ordinary middle aged magician. It hadn't even occurred to me that a teacher might be the culprit, but adults can obviously be bullies too. Did something come to mind, miss? Well, I was giving Norn her homework back yesterday, and she couldn't finish all the assignments you dumped on her, so you made her stand naked in the facility office for an hour? What? No, no! She didn't do too well on the assignment, so I told her to learn from your example and try a little harder next time. I thought she was going to cry for a moment, but then she nodded and said she'd do her best. Wait, what? She nearly cried? Oh, wait, that reminds me. All of a sudden, there were multiple people chiming in from all over the classroom, and all of them had similar stories to share. After leaving the classroom behind, the three of us headed over to the dining hall. At this time of day, it was totally deserted. I took a seat at random and flopped forward onto the table. This one really hurt. Long story short, it all came back to me. Every time Norn had lost her cool, it had been because of someone mentioning my name and comparing me to her. Most of the students in her class had known that we were siblings. That wasn't too strange, and in and of itself. We had the same parents and we looked alike, but whenever someone mentioned this, Norn reacted badly. She hated being compared to me, but she got just as upset when someone referenced me as a way of complimenting her. Her classmates weren't to blame for any of this. None of them were deliberately trying to upset her. Some of them were even trying to be nice by telling her she was nothing like her scary bully of a brother. The real issue was that nearly everyone in the school knew me. And so, even without really meaning to, they tended to bring me up when they were around her. That was always going to be rough for Norn. Back in her old school, she'd been constantly compared to Aisha, and never in a good way. She was the less talented sister, and they rubbed her nose in it every single day. She was finally in a new school, living on her own, without Aisha hanging all over her like a shadow. Before she had a chance to catch her breath, everyone started comparing her to me. No matter where she went, she was forced to face the fact that she was the least talented member of her family. That had to be rough in it itself. Then, just to top it all off, there'd been that incident with the panties. No one had actually been traumatized by the whole mess, fortunately. Ariel did a great job following up with the victims, and by now, most of them could look back on it and laugh. From the sound of things, Linnea hadn't forced the girls to strip against their will, but rather just pestered them to trade their underwear. It seems someone had seen this happening from a distance and given the student council an exaggerated version of events. Still, I could only imagine now Norn had felt when she heard about it. Or, still, I could only imagine how Norn had felt when she heard about it. It's hard enough to feel inferior to your brother, but feeling inferior to your total pervert of a brother had to be 10 times worse. What was the matter with me anyway? I jumped to conclusions and barged into her classroom like an idiot. I wasn't a helicopter parent, I was a helicopter dumbass. Sorry about dragging you into that, guys, I mumbled, looking over my faithful subordinates. I guess I was being kind of stupid. That ain't true. It's never stupid to try and help your family. She's right, boss. If the kid stays in that room too long, her brain's gonna melt into mush. Too true, Mew. She might even become as stupid as Linnea. Yeah, she might. Meow? I couldn't even muster up a smile as Linnea and Persenna went on their usual comedy routine. I knew how tricky situations like this could be. People don't just stop going outside because it's fun, you know? There's always a reason why they can't bring themselves to leave and drag them out. Sorry. And dragging them out of their room by force doesn't change that. In fact, it often makes the problem worse. That said, this wasn't the sort of thing we could just ignore. If Norn stayed in there for too long, she'd end up regretting it. Even a wasted month or two can have serious consequences. I knew all of this from bitter experience. It wasn't something you could just explain to a kid who was right there in the middle of it. Eventually, even the stubbornest cases start to wish they could go back and do things differently. But it takes a long time to get to that point. Real regret doesn't hit you until a year or two or even 10 slips by. by that point, it's too late to undo any of the choices you made. It's part of why so many parents push their kids so hard. I guess everyone has regrets. Sometimes you make those regrets out on make wow. Sometimes you take those regrets out on others. Tell me something, you two. Let's say you're less talented than your siblings and people won't stop reminding you of that fact. It's the best thing you can do about it. Lenny and Persimmon looked at each other and shrugged their shoulders. I don't know, boss. Two of us are pretty talented, you know? Yep, we're not too shabby at anything. Wait, I thought you two got shipped out here because you were too dumb and lazy to lead your tribe, right? Like they wanted to whip you into shape before they gave you any power? Well, whatever, their total lack of self awareness clearly wasn't hurting them. That approach wasn't going to work for Norn, though. She was a sensitive little girl, not a fur brained narcissist. Oh, I don't know, someone like that. Oh, I do know someone like that, though, said Linnea proudly. Aunt Ghislaine. She used to be a thug who went around starting fights at all the time, but then she started training and she ended up becoming a sword king. Hmm. Okay, that's not a bad example. Ghislaine was an exceptional case, but there was definitely a chance that Norn had some unexpected talent we hadn't discovered yet. There was no reason for her to compete with me or Aisha at the things that we were good at. If she didn't want to be compared to us, she could just do something neither of us had even tried. I wasn't sure exactly what that something could be, but the world was a big place. Surely she could find a field that interested her outside the realm of magic or swordplay. There was a risk she wouldn't be particularly talented at whatever she decided to do with her life. It had happened to Zenoba, after all, but despite his lack of talent as an artisan, the prince still seemed to be enjoying his life. He got to make his own figures, collect them, and appreciate them. That was enough to make him happy, and that was all that really mattered. It would probably be hard to convince Norn of this, though. None of these arguments would have worked on me back in the day. How am I supposed to talk to her about all of this? Don't ever think it, boss. Barge right in there and give it to her straight. Yep, just tell her to get her butt back in class. They sure make it sound simple, but maybe I was spending too much time trying to think through all the details. Norn was only 10 years old, after all. Maybe she was just sulking. I mean, this was only her second day in her room, right? It was way too early to even call her a shut in at this point. Spending a couple of days alone when you're feeling down isn't anything that unusual. That said, she was obviously struggling right now. I'd been telling myself she probably just needed space, but was that actually true? Maybe I'd just been avoiding the issue. As her big brother, I could have at least tried to actively support Norn and help her adjust. The hands off approach might be easier, but that didn't mean it was the better choice. It might be a different story if we're talking about a high school aged kid or even a junior high schooler. But Norn was only 10. Giving her more attention than she wanted was probably the right call. Before I knew it, I'd settled on a plan of action. All right, then, I'll go talk to her. That's the spirit, boss. Yeah, go give her a little slap upside the head. Of course, I was the direct cause of Norn's problem, so it seemed very possible that she wouldn't listen to a word I had to say. But I wasn't going to drive myself crazy thinking about that. First things first, I had to go and see her and hear what she had to say. Oh, I'm not sure how I'm going to get to her though. Norn's room was in the girls' dormitory. I could walk past it safely these days, but that didn't mean they were going to let me wander inside. Just sneak your way in, obviously. Time for covert operation, boss. Leave the plan to us. The covert operation didn't prove too difficult, thankfully. I had lots of friends on the inside. Sylphie and Ariel were in that dorm, too. When I explained the situation to the princess, she immediately agreed to help me out. Of course, Gallade and the other members of her self defense squad weren't going to be so easily convinced, so this still needed to be a secret visit. Lenny and Persina and Sylphie would be handling the actual operational support. Sylphie was eager to help, but she seemed a little downcast about the situation. I'm sorry, Rudy. I promised you I'd keep an eye out for Norn, but she doesn't even want to talk to me. It's not your fault, Sylphie. I'm the one to blame here. I explained what I'd learned about the situation, including the fact that Norn's depression had a lot to do with me. Sylphie listened quietly, but ultimately frowned and shook her head. None of that sounds like your fault, Rudy. What? But uh, hmm, maybe I hadn't really done anything that wrong, come to think of it. Not that I'd handled the situation very well either. It didn't matter either way. I still needed to fix this. That evening, I waited until dinner time, then headed for the dorm. Hold on a second, guys. Need to get some water. Also, guys, don't post hydrate after the fact. Like, you're just wasting channel points at that. If you're gonna drop channel points on stuff, might as well be for exercises. Anyway, there we go. The majority of the residents were off at the dining hall at the moment. Word had gotten around that Ariel was going to be giving an impromptu speech there, and she always drew a big crowd. That didn't mean the dorms would be totally deserted, though. You couldn't fit the whole student body in the dining hall even if you tried. Still, I understood that the members of the self defense squad were being encouraged to attend. I slipped along the side of the building as furtively as possible, looking for a specific room. After a few moments, I spotted it, a window with a single flower placed up against the window sill. I grabbed a small pebble and tossed it at the window. A moment later, it slid open. After that, it was just a matter of lifting myself up off the ground with the spell Earth Lance and clambering inside. Hmm. I found myself in a dark room with a strong animal funk. I didn't mind the scent that much, but it was because the beasts in question were also young women. Animals tend to be more tolerant of the odors emitted by potential mates, right? Thanks for the help. You betcha, boss. Linnea had been waiting in here for me for a while. Her cat-like eyes glinted slightly in the darkness. My eyes were starting to adjust, so I took a look around the place. The layout was perfectly typical. You had your two-tier bunk bed, a couple of desks and chairs, and a shared closet. It was a little hard to tell, but the room looked like a bit of a mess. Don't look around too much, boss. You're embarrassing, you know? It's embarrassing, you know? Right, sorry. I took a few cautious steps forward and groped around looking for the doorknob. Instead, my hand uh, closed around something oddly soft. Oh, that's one of Percenta's bras. I wasn't sure what her cup size was, but from the feel of things, it had to be impressive. Feel free to take that one home with you, boss. I don't think you get to decide that. I tossed aside the brassiere with a sigh. Normally, I might have taken this opportunity to press it to my mouth and take a few deep breaths, but there was no time to waste at the moment. Linnea slipped past me and knocked on her door from the inside. A few seconds later, another knock answered from the outside. It's like, we're good. The two of us swung open the door, and I quickly slid into the laundry cart that was waiting in front. Burrowing beneath a pile of sheets, from the smell alone, I could tell these had come from Sylphia's bed. There were blankets and shirts in there as well to provide a little more volume, and all of them smelled like her. I couldn't work up the energy to get aroused, though. Norn was the only thing on my mind right now. My little sister was suffering. She was all alone in that room, totally isolated, hiding from the world, and I had to help her. I was her brother, after all. Okay, let's roll. Yeah, exactly, Daxter. Yeah, 100% on that. As the cart rattled along down the hallways, I turned my thoughts to the problem at hand. If this was just a temper tantrum, that was one thing. What if it was something more serious? Would I be of any use? Until the day my brothers kicked me out of the street, I'd never managed to leave my house. If there were any argument that could have coaxed me out, I don't I didn't know it. We're here, boss. The cart reached its destination before I could reach any real conclusions. We were outside Norton's room. I pushed open the door as quietly as I could and stepped inside. The room was totally dark, so I paused to light one of the candles in the corner. In its faint light, I could see Norn sitting on her bed, holding her knees to her chest. Her eyes were wide open, and she was staring right at me. I approached her slowly and took a seat in the closest chair. What were you supposed to say at times like this, anyway? What would I have wanted someone to say to me? couldn't remember. All the words I'd rehearsed before evaporated from my mind. I could remember things I used to hate hearing, at least, mainly the cheap cliches, if nothing else. I wasn't going to fall into the my way or the highway pattern. No. You're going back to school right now. No. I'm paying for your tutoring for a reason, young lady. And no. Stop making such a nuisance of yourself. Lines like that would only backfire on me. Maybe Linnea and Priscilla were right in a sense. A slap upside the head might be simplest. Norton was only 10 years old, so it might be enough to make her do what I wanted, but that would be the opposite of a long term solution. Another crisis would pop up soon enough, and she'd grow steadily more defiant. And apart from anything else, it was my fault she was hiding in here. What right did I have to lecture her, let alone hit her? If anything, I owed her an apology. Not that saying sorry was going to change anything. The rumors about me weren't going to go away, and Norn was going to keep getting compared to me. Norn, Rudius? We had both spoken at the same time. I cut myself off mid sentence so Norn could continue, but she'd fallen silent as well. It was a crappy feeling. I sort of felt like I missed my only chance. I had to believe that wasn't really the case though, so I forced myself to start the conversation. I'm sorry, Norn. It hasn't been easy for you here, has it? I paused for a moment, but she didn't say anything in response. You finally got into a new school, but now everyone's pestering you about me. Not even sure what to say, honestly, continued. Norn didn't respond. I guess I don't really even understand you that well. Still no response, and despite all the thinking I'd done on my way over here, I found myself at a loss for words. I didn't know anything about her. I kept my distance from her, telling myself not to pry. I hadn't even tried to get to know her. I know this must be hard for you, but I'm not sure what to do. I tried again. Norton was still silent. I couldn't begin to tell what she was thinking. I didn't even know if she was listening to me. Is this a lost cause after all? Should I just back down and wait for Paul to get here? Maybe I should step back and seek help from the people I knew. Maybe Nanahoshi could offer some insight or on what a younger girl might be thinking. Maybe a little Elise could figure out some clever way to coax her out. There was no reason I had to try and solve this by myself, right? Oh, suddenly I found myself remembering something I hadn't thought about in a long time. When I first shut myself away from the world, one of my brothers used to come see me in my room. He'd always look me right in the eye and hit me with all sorts of reasonable sounding arguments. Life always has its ups and downs, but there are people out there who have it worse than you. Things might be tough right now, but if you just run away from all your problems, you'll keep running forever. That's much worse in the long run. You don't have to go back to school right away, but why don't you at least come out and have lunch with me? In my mind, I answered those words by spitting in his face, and in reality, I ignored him. Even so, he would stay in there for some time after delivering his speeches. He'd watch me closely, looking like he had something more to say, but I kept on ignoring him, confident that he couldn't possibly understand my feelings. Maybe this was how he'd felt back then. We used to sit like that for hours sometimes in total silence before he'd finally get up and leave. After a while, he stopped coming. I could only guess what he was thinking. Although he didn't show up anymore, a bunch of other people started to visit me instead. Maybe he'd arranged that. In the end, I paid no attention to anything those people said either. This must be a crucial turning point. If I backed down now, I had a terrible feeling that Norn might stay in this room forever. Couldn't just turn and run. Not this time. For a long moment, I studied my sister quietly in the darkness. Oh, wow. There's chapter 4 done. All right. So let's tally up those exercises and get to them. Mm-hmm. 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 10 crunches, 10 squats, and 20 Russian twists. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, 10 squats. There's 10 there. Okay. I ended up doing 12 and I didn't mean to. All right. Thank you. Thank you. We are good. Okay, so I'm not completely done with this bottle. I got two of them. Oh man. It's Saturday. You know what that means. It's Spy Family Day. Episode 3 came out and we finally got to see the full ending, not not the music over a scene. We got to see the actual ED. Oh, it's so cute. I think you guys are going to like it. Here we go. Chapter 5. Norn Greyrat. I'm not sure when I started to be afraid of my brother, but it wasn't that way from the start. The first time I met Rudius was the day he punched my dad in the face. I loved my dad. He had some huge flaws, but I knew he cared about me very much, and he always put me first. More importantly, I was less than 5 years old at the time. Most kids love their parents unconditionally at that age. I adored my dad, and Rudius showed up out of nowhere and started hitting him. I didn't really understand the conversation that led up to it. At this point, years after the fact, I can recognize my dad actually provoked the fight. Rudius had just completed a long, difficult journey that through dangerous country, and Dad mocked him harshly. But at the time, all I saw was my brother sitting on top of my dad, and and punching him repeatedly. And all I could think was, he's going to kill him. It was the only thing that mattered to me in the moment. Naturally, I wasn't about to accept that monster like that was a part of my family. I wasn't scared of Rudius back then, I just hated him. I kept hating him for a long time after that. It didn't help that everyone felt the need to compliment him. It wasn't just my father. When I met my sister and the family maid later, they also talked about him in glowing tones, but the more they praised him, the more stubbornly I despised him. I hated my sister almost as much as I hated Rudius. At the school we went to together, Aisha insisted on constantly competing with me. She challenged me in the classroom and on the field we used to exercise, and she always beat me soundly. She rubbed my nose in my failures. With her around, I spent every single day feeling like a loser. I didn't think I could ever be friends with her. My grandmother was aware of this state of affairs, and she didn't like it one bit. She had nothing but contempt for Aisha, who she called illegitimate. But she also had high hopes for me, or at least high expectations. She said I was a lady of the Latria family. Apparently that meant I needed to be competent at the very least. I was forced to attend etiquette classes and lessons to prepare for specific ceremonies. None of it came naturally to me. I messed up repeatedly and was scolded on a daily basis. Whenever I embarrassed myself, my grandmother would mutter, I suppose the adventuring business must pollute the blood as well as the spirit. I knew she was insulting both my mom and my dad with those words. My dad worked hard for me, and that was all she had to say about him. It didn't take long for me to start hating her as well. And so when my brother's teacher showed up and told us where my mother was, I decided to follow my dad on his journey instead of staying with my grandmother. Dad was hesitant. He thought it would be safer for me to stay behind. My mother came from Millis aristocracy and my father from an Osirian noble house. I had a good lineage, at least in those terms. Because of that, my grandfather was willing to take me into his household on a permanent basis. But I hated that idea, so I begged my dad to me with him. I cried and pleaded, and eventually I got to come along. And yet, in the end, my dad sent me off to live with Rudius. He said things would be too dangerous from now on. He said Rudius was living up north, so I should go stay there and wait for him. He said he'd follow me up there once he found my mom. I cried. I refused. I pleaded with him to take me along. The last thing I wanted was to be separated from him now, after we'd come so far together. If Richard hadn't shown up when he did, I might have worn my dad down eventually. And then I would probably have gotten sick or injured in that harsh country, or on that harsh journey across the Beggarit continent. I would probably have caused him all sorts of trouble. Thanks to Richard, it didn't come to that. I remembered him so clearly. On the day I met my brother, Richard had reached out and caught me when I tripped on the street. He'd patted my head and given me an apple. I didn't know his name at the time. At some point, I'd learned he was my brother's bodyguard, but I never got the chance to ask his name. He was just as kind the second time we met. He patted me on the head again and gently persuaded me to do the right thing. And so I ended up heading north toward my brother's new home. Aisha was full of energy and enthusiasm from the moment we got on the road. She dropped the good girl act she put on around Dad and Lilia, started acting like the leader of our expedition, and came up with all sorts of crazy plans. I thought she was being stupid. It seemed ridiculous for her to try to take charge when we had two grown-ups traveling with us. For some reason, Richard and Ginger took her seriously and even agreed to most of her her ideas. It didn't seem fair at all. Her opinions always seemed to carry more weight. Anything I said basically got ignored. The main reason I could put up with it was Richard. He was considerate of my feelings, at least. He always made the time to comfort me and listen to my complaints. But even he spent lots of time complimenting my brother. He called Rudius a remarkable man. He told me how he looked forward to seeing him. He even smiled slightly when he spoke about him. And he almost never smiled. The Rudius I knew and the Rudius he talked about seemed to be entirely different people. Maybe that was when I started to be afraid of my brother. Rudius was a powerful magician. He was worthy of respect. Everyone said so. The Rudius I knew was a man who'd thrown my dad to the floor and beaten him. He was a violent person. If I upset him, there was no guarantee he wouldn't hit me with the way he hit my dad. I was scared to meet him, and the idea of living with him for months was terrifying. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night trembling. Sometimes I couldn't fall asleep at all. Richard was always there to comfort me, at least. He'd put me on his lap, and we'd look up at the stars together, and he told me stories of his past. Most of them were sad, but for some reason they always helped me fall asleep. When I met Rudius again for the first time in years, he was drunk and clinging to a woman. Apparently, she was some childhood friend from Buena Village, and they'd gotten married recently. I didn't remember her at all. I had a vague memory of some older kid hanging around Aisha and Lilia, but I didn't remember her being anything like this Sylphie person. She must have changed a lot over the years. Rudius was clearly enjoying his life to the fullest. It made me angry to see that. My dad hadn't wasted any time playing around with women for years and years. He said he was putting that on hold until he found my mom. He hadn't even touched Lilia, let alone any of the other women in his life. My brother's first priority, on the other hand, was his own happiness. That made me mad. I couldn't bring myself to say anything, though. I was afraid of him. I was afraid he might start hitting me if I made him angry. Would Richard step in to defend me if it came to that? It was hard to say. He seemed really happy to see Rudius again. Maybe he wouldn't take my side. Maybe he'd say I was the one being rude or selfish. I couldn't say anything that first night, and then the very next day, Richard left for good. I'd assumed he would be staying with us for a while longer. I didn't want him to go, but he left anyway. I was even more afraid than before. The only people left in the house were Rudius, his wife, and Aisha. My little sister was overjoyed about being with Rudius again. Sylphie seemed like a nice enough person, but she wasn't on my side. I didn't have anyone on my side, and I was stuck here until my dad got back. I'd have to live in fear for months and months. Rudius would probably be nice to Aisha, but strict with me. He'd praise my sister and tell me to try harder. Aisha always said it was my fault I couldn't do anything right. She said I didn't put in the effort, but there were things I just couldn't do no matter how hard I tried. Even when I wanted to improve, even when I put in lots of practice, I still couldn't compare to her. So what was I supposed to do? From now on, or for now, all I could do was stay out of the way. I hid myself away, hoping no one would get mad at me, hoping no one would tell me how inferior I was. The city outside was covered in snow. I was afraid of getting tossed out into the cold on my own. Rudius decided I had to start attending school. This university sounded pretty different from the school I'd attended back in Militione. I could enroll as a first year, but that didn't mean all my classmates would be my age. There were all sorts of people studying there, and most of them were older than me. To be honest, I didn't want to go. I knew I'd just end up being compared to Aisha again. As it turned out, though, my sister had no intention of going to school ever again. That was good news for me, at least. Without her around, maybe I could do a little better. My brother gave Aisha a condition, though. She had to take the university entrance exam. This was a test everyone had to take before they entered the school, which meant I'd be taking it too. That discouraged me deeply. There was no way I could pass a test without even studying for it. But when I told Rudius that, he said he could just buy me a spot at the university. It was such a thoughtless, rude thing to say that I got angry despite myself. Then Aisha got mad at me for being mad, and it turned into a fight. Cut it out, you two. My brother's cold tone was set off a twinge of fear inside me. I thought he was going to punch me for a second. I was so scared I cried a little. Was I going to have to keep living like this, constantly flinching in fear? On the day of the exam, Rudius told me about the dorms. Apparently, the University of Magic let its students live in the big buildings on the campus to help them grow more independent. It sounded like the solution to all my problems. I had no doubt my sister would pass the exam, which meant she wouldn't have to go to school. So if I moved into the dorms, I wouldn't have to see her or Rudius anymore. No one would compare me to anybody. I could just be myself and live on my own. The more I thought about it, the more perfect it sounded. A few days later, we got the results from the test, and my brother asked me what I wanted to do. Hesitantly, I admitted that I wanted to live in the dorms. I was afraid he might get angry. My dad had wanted me to stay with Rudius, and he'd probably told Rudius to keep an eye on me in his letter. I thought my brother might get mad, maybe even hit me for being so selfish, but to my surprise, Rudius agreed immediately. It was Aisha who got angry. She thought it was unfair that I was getting what I wanted. Up until now, she'd always gotten better treatment than me. I guess she didn't like the fact that Rudius had tested her, but not me. Still, why had my brother agreed to my request? I didn't know. I didn't understand him at all. Looking back, I realized that he hadn't gotten upset with me at all since I'd arrived earlier. Oh, sorry, since I arrived here. Except for that one time I fought with Aisha. Maybe he just wasn't interested in me at all. Maybe he thought taking care of me was nothing more than a nuisance, and he saw this as a golden opportunity to kick me out. For all I knew, he'd been planning to dump me in the dorms regardless. That would be convenient as far as I was concerned, but for some reason the thought made me feel a little sad. Everything about living in the dorms was new to me. It was genuinely exciting. For the first time in my life, I had a roommate. I was going to be living with an older girl named Marissa. She was a demon. My grandmother said demons were evil creatures, monsters to be driven away or destroyed. If I hadn't met Regerd, I probably would have kept on believing that. But I had met Regerd. So I introduced myself politely to Marissa, and she welcomed me warmly in return. I needed a lot of help since I was starting in the middle of the school term, and Marissa was really there for me. She taught me how the meals worked here, where the bathrooms were, and the rules of the dorm. As she was showing me around the place, a scary looking demon girl from the self defense squad spotted us and introduced herself to me. We're all one big family here, she said, so we've got to look out for each other. I was a little intimidated by her, but Marissa told me she was a good hearted person who took her responsibility seriously. All in all, I was very much looking forward to my new life here. It was annoying that I had to go back to my brother's house once every 10 days, but he didn't ask me too many specific questions, so it wasn't that big of a deal. And so I began my new life as a boarding school student. Immediately, I realized that the classes here were very difficult. I think it was partially because the teachers explained everything so differently compared to the ones back in Millis. It might have been different if I'd been there for all the lessons from the beginning, but I was jumping in midway. There were lots of lectures I just couldn't follow. Back in Millis, we had a lot of classes about religion, but that wasn't even a subject here. Instead, we had practical lessons in magic. I wasn't good at those either. The professors didn't bother explaining the basics. Matt, I love that mash. I haven't met the grandmother, but I hate her already. Yeah, yeah. A lot of us do not like Lilia, Zenith's mom. It was a little discouraging, but if my grades were too terrible, I might end up getting dragged back to my brother's house. I tried to study in my dorm room, but it wasn't helping. And then, just as I was reaching the end of my rope, Marissa was nice enough to start tutoring me. With her patient help, I finally managed to get my head around some of the concepts I was supposed to be learning in class. Would probably have understood all this instantly. Sometimes I hated myself for being so stupid. The campus was very large, and I got lost on a regular basis. The practical lessons in magic and fitness were particularly bad. They held those in a bunch of different rooms that I could never remember how to find. Every time I got lost, I'd have to ask some older student for directions or wait until someone from my class came to find me. Once I even ran into Rudius while I was lost. For some reason, he was walking with the most important student in the entire school. It was incredibly embarrassing. Everyone in the university was afraid of my brother. From the sound of things, he was the boss of a small gang of 6 thugs that went around doing anything they wanted. 2 of those people lived in my dorm. They were tall, scary looking girls who strutted around like they owned the place. Marissa had warned me not to get in their way if I could help it. Rumor had it that Rudius had ordered those 2 to collect a pair of panties from every cute girl in school. Did my brother's wife know about that? Probably not. I had no idea what he was planning to do with all that underwear in the first place, but it made me really mad. My dad was risking his life to save my mom, and my brother was just playing around like an idiot. My opinion of him was sinking steadily lower. But despite his bizarre actions, my brother's reputation was strangely positive. People said he never picked on ordinary students. Although he did as he pleased, he didn't hurt anybody or harass them. In fact, he supposedly told all the tough kids to stop picking on anyone weaker than them. One of the scarier kids in my class even bragged about having spoken to Rudius once. Rudius was better at magic than anyone else in the university, and apparently he was a good teacher, too. People said he was tutoring a girl even younger than me. My classmates, my teachers, and even Marissa told me I should try to follow in his footsteps. They wanted me to be like him, to be like the brother I feared and hated. I didn't understand at all. I didn't want to be like him. But more than anything, it hurt to know I couldn't compare to him. He was better than me at everything, just like Aisha. No matter how hard I tried, I'd never be a match for him. Hated Rudius. I thought he was a terrible person. But the fact was, I couldn't even begin to compete with him. One day I returned to my dorm room and flopped straight down on my bed. A great big jumble of emotions had been growing inside me for weeks now: bitterness, sadness, self pity, anger, and who knew what else. I couldn't hold them back anymore. I couldn't stop myself from breaking down. Marissa came to the room a little later. She saw me crying into a pillow and gently asked me what's wrong, but I just said, "It's nothing," and pulled my blanket over my head. What was I supposed to do now? Was I wrong about Rudius, or was it everybody else? It was probably me. He probably wasn't a bad person as I thought he was. Oh, sorry. He probably wasn't as bad a person as I thought he was. I was very young on the day I saw Rudius punch my dad. After it happened, my dad tried to explain to me that he'd been going through a lot and I could never understand what that was supposed to mean. But now, after all this time, it finally made some sense to me. I was going through a lot myself at the moment, after all. If I worked hard, turned things around, and managed to cheer up, it would really suck to have someone say, "Wow, look at you. Must be nice to have such a carefree life." Probably want to punch them in the fact, too. Oh, sorry. Hold on. I'd probably want to punch them, in fact, even if it was my own dad. Deep down, Rudius and I were probably similar people. He wasn't some inhuman monster after all. That said, was I supposed to go talk things through with him? What would he even want from me? How had he managed to make up with Dad anyway? I thought about it and thought some more. Nothing came to mind, but eventually my belly began to hurt. My stomach cramped up painfully and I started to feel nauseated. So I burrowed deeper into my bed and did nothing. Couldn't do anything. I couldn't even bring myself to go face my brother. At times like these, Dad was always there for me. When something bad happened and I curled up in bed, he'd come in and gently rub my back for a while. And after we were separated, Richard took his place, put me on his lap and pat my head and tell me stories. I didn't have anyone like that here. Marissa was nice to me, but she wasn't on my side. All she could suggest is that I should talk to my brother or try going back to class. I knew all that already. The problem was my body didn't want to move. Much time had passed since I curled up in my bed. Kept thinking in circles for what felt like many hours, then falling asleep out of exhaustion. I repeated that cycle a couple of times, so it might have been a few days by now. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, and for some reason, Rudius was in front of me. He was sitting backward on a chair and staring at me. Nor and I, Rudius? It felt like the first time I'd spoken my brother's name out loud. The two of us had broken the silence at the exact same time. Apparently, I wasn't hallucinating then. What had he gotten into the girl's dorm? I was so confused I didn't know what to say. My brother was quiet too. For a while, we just stared at each other. This had to be the first time I'd looked this closely at Rudius's face. He looked a little anxious. His features reminded me a little of my dad, which is kind of reassuring, but of course they look alike. I'm sorry, Norn. It hasn't been easy for you here, has it? Rudius said, his voice hesitant. I guess I don't really even understand you that well. I know this must be hard for you, but I'm not sure what to do. Was it just me, or was he really nervous? That reminded me of my dad, too. My brother fell silent again. He just sat there quietly, not moving an inch. He was watching me anxiously, but he didn't budge from that chair. My dad probably would have wrapped his arms around me by now, and Regard would have patted me on the head, but my brother didn't even approach me. Oh, suddenly I understood why. He couldn't approach me. He was too scared I might reject him. The instant that occurred to me, I felt all my negative emotions begin to melt away. I didn't hate Rudius anymore. I couldn't find him scary either. He was too much like my dad. He was never going to hit me no matter what, and he probably wasn't ever going to hit my dad ever again either. I needed to forgive him. There were tears rolling down my cheeks now. My throat was quivering. After a moment, I started to sob. I'm sorry, Rudius. I'm sorry. Slowly, cautiously, my brother stood up and sat down next to me. He gently put his hand on my head, and then he hugged me to his chest. His hand was warm and his chest was firm. He smelled a little bit like my dad, too. I spent the rest of the night crying in his arms. Oh, man, that was intense. Okay, we're changing perspective now. Back to Rudius. That is not the end of the chapter. Just want to point that out. All right. Rudius. In the end, I didn't do much of anything. Norton didn't tell me what was going on. She never told me what she was upset about or what she'd been feeling. She cried for a long time, and then when it was finally over, she looked up and mumbled, I'll be okay now. That was it. For some reason, she really did look okay for once. She even managed to look me right in the eye. At the start of the book. Oh. Let me hang on one second. Bam. Okay. Oh, yeah, you're right. It's that. Yep. There we go. There we go. All right, cool. I felt enormously relieved. Something told me she was going to be all right now. And so I left the rest to Sylphie and slipped out of my sister's room. Norn grew noticeably more cheerful after that incident. The changes weren't exactly dramatic. She just started saying hello to me when we passed each other in the hall. We still didn't talk that much, and she didn't start hanging all over me like her sister. She was probably still getting compared to me in her classes, but I guess it didn't bother her as much anymore. I still didn't understand what she was feeling. I hadn't done anything meaningful at all. It made me feel a little pathetic. I knew how it felt to be looked down on, and knew how it felt to isolate yourself in your room, but I'd still failed to come up with anything useful to say. At the end of the day, I guess Norn had worked it out herself. She processed her feelings and pulled herself over the obstacle in her path. That was a seriously impressive accomplishment. Paul and Aisha seemed to think Norn was just a clumsy, timid kid without any special talents, but I have a very different opinion of her now. She'd managed to climb out of a hole I'd spent an entire lifetime trapped in. If I'd been half as strong as her, maybe my first life wouldn't have turned out so miserably. Maybe I wouldn't have wound up getting punched in the face by my kind hearted brother. It was impossible to know for sure. Of course, my situation was different from Norn's. Even if I worked out my feelings, I might have never left my room. Maybe I needed to be reborn and meet Roxy for that to be possible. Either way, I couldn't change the past. The relationships I'd broken could never be repaired. And I'd never know for sure what was going through my brother's head back then. Still, kind of felt like something that was stuck between my teeth for a very long time had just worked its way free. If Nanahoshi managed to return to our world someday, I'd have to ask her to take a message to my brother. Thanks for trying to get through to me back then, and I'm sorry. Whoa! What an intense chapter. That's chapter 5. Go ahead and tally up the exercises. I'm going to go grab a Q tip because I've got a little water in my ear to get out. And yeah, be right back.
Sounds like someone could benefit from some of Nyanta's nibbles.
I forgot something important as well while I was out. It was him. It was him. Come here. Come on up. Come on. Come on. Up. Good boy. Let it stay. No bacon bits. No bacon. It's bacon strips. Dogs don't know they're not bacon. My happy plush. Thanks. Which one? I've got two. This one is like a little happy backpack, and this plush right here is the regular size plush. The only difference between it and a lot of other happy plushes, that one's signed by Hiro Mashima. He signed Happy's foot. It was, I think, 2011. Yeah, I think I was at New York Comic Con in 2011. It was around the time that Fairy Tales dub was just coming out. But yeah, that well spotted. Okay, so I gotta go back up and look. See, now there's not prints all over it. I might be able to read this Kindle book real quick. All right, stay there, Toby. Stay there. It's pupper time. Pupper time. Yes. It's puppy doggy time. Yes. Okay, let's scroll up. Hi. Hi. Okay, we got 10 push-ups, 10 heel touches, and 10 jumping jacks. And that's it. That's what we got right now. You want to be on camera? Stay. 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 There's a Tober. There's a Toby. Okay. Jumping jacks, push-ups, and heel touches. Mr. Clean. Yeah, that's kind of true. I'm very much Mr. Clean. We've got the baldness. But I've been losing my hair since I was 22, so that's nothing new. That would have probably made me mad about 10 years ago, but I've gotten over it. Hi. 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 Did you enjoy your treats, buddy? That's right, we're doing Toby pets right now. You're the star of the show, buddy. Look at that. Look at that face. How could you not love this face? Look, Toby. Look at the camera. Yeah. Hey, Toby, buddy. Okay, can you do me a favor? Can you stay? Oh, no, you can't. You can't stay. Okay. Ready? Okay, I think we had jumping jacks, twists, and push-ups, right? All right, so wait for jumping jacks. What if we do reverse Toby push-ups? You know? Like, if I just lay down and just lift a Toby. You know? He's like 40 something. Of course, he doesn't weigh nearly as much as I do. Yeah? Ready? Oh, buddy. Stay. Stay. There you go. Oh, buddy. Hi. How you doing? Can I do heel touches? Can I do heel touches? Yes. One. Okay. Now we do push-ups. Right, Toby? Good boy. Good boy. Oh, I'm gonna back up though. Ready? Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 Toby kisses. 10 Toby kisses. 10 Toby kisses. Ah, 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 ah. How you doing, Toby? Are you good? You good? Yeah. I gotta go wash the dishes after this, right? Right? Also, for those of you that are excited that Reincarnated as a Sword is coming out, I'm excited too. 10 volumes into that. I will go and start showing off some of the series after this that I'm reading. So I definitely want y'all to stick around at the end. And please remind me of that. All right, let me get a little bit of water. Slightly out of breath. What happens because I have exercise-induced asthma. Because we're almost halfway through volume 11 as far as like the chapters that we have to read and stuff. So what I want to do is start getting an early look at what you guys want to read next, and that's going to be the stuff that we go into reading. I have a bunch of them, a bunch of different light novel series outside of Mushoku Tensei. Now we're not going to continue on with Spider. I've already killed that. Sorry, I'll be reading it on my own, but like Spider's one of those, and that's another thing. It's like, guys, if I don't enjoy reading these, we'll move on to another series. You know. But also, like doing 3 a week, that was a lot. It's a lot easier to do 2 a week. Like if I do Ari Ferret is really good. Yeah, I might do that. As much as I am kind of enjoying doing as much as I'm kind of enjoying reading Grimgar Fantasy and Ash right now, I'm not a big fan of the fact that it is told in second person. That really annoys me. It's kind of annoying. All right. But yeah, we'll go through that later. We've got the last chapter here. This is chapter 6, Life with the Grey Rat Sisters. So let's go ahead and get started. We're at 101 pages out of 275, so we're not doing bad. Yeah, if you guys don't know the difference between first person, second person, third person narratives, go look it up. Google it. It doesn't. It really doesn't. It's so weird. I'm used to it being told from either a first person or a third person perspective. Typically a first person. This is not first person. I'm currently rereading, playing the I don't know Utaware. Okay, I don't know that series. Sorry. All right, guys. Here we go. Chapter 6, Life with the Grey Rat Sisters. Another month had passed and the weather was finally warming up. This would be the second summer I'd spent in Renoa. Even at this time of year, it wasn't exactly hot in this region, but people were starting to dress a little more lightly. The students at school switched to short-sleeved uniforms, which I didn't mind one bit, and Aisha changed up her maid uniform as well. Sylvie even started wearing sleeveless shirts around the house. I didn't remember her owning anything like that before, but I guess she'd purchased a few more outfits after moving in with me. I certainly wasn't going to complain about her choosing to show me more skin. The sight of those slender white shoulders made it a little harder to keep my hands to myself, though. Summer was a nice season, all right, and up here you didn't have any nasty multi-legged visitors scuttling into your house to nibble at your food either. Wait, what? The changing seasons reminded me that I hadn't seen Batty Gaddy around for some time now. Maybe he'd wandered off somewhere and forgotten to tell anyone. A few other things had changed over the course of this month. First of all, it seemed Norn had made a few friends. I'd noticed her moving around in a group of 3 girls and 2 boys, including some students from different classes. These were probably Norn's first real friends. I wanted to introduce myself to them, so I asked her to bring them over to our house sometime, but she'd flatly rejected the idea. I guess she found the idea of introducing them to her family too embarrassing. Or, she was worried about you intimidating them just by, being you, existing. On the bright side, it seemed the way I'd barged into her classroom apparently hadn't caused her too much trouble after all. That was a bit of a relief. Norn and I were also getting along a little better, just in general. As a prime example, she'd recently asked me to tutor her in some of her subjects. I happily accepted, of course. I was ready to teach her all my secret techniques and everything I knew, but then I realized that if I spent too much time focusing on helping her, Aisha might get a little sulky over being left out. After thinking it over a little, I decided to meet Norn in the library after school for regular tutoring sessions and limit them to an hour per day. We could go over things she'd learned that day and review what her classes would be covering tomorrow. That would make a big difference by itself. Norn was obviously trying hard to keep up, but she seemed. Sorry, I accidentally hit my keyboard. But she seemed to struggle with putting the theory from her textbook into actual practice. That said, she wasn't nearly as bad as Eris or Ghislaine had been. With a consistent effort, I felt confident she'd get up to an average level in no time. By the way, Regard said he was from Babinos area, right? She asked me once. I know you were in the demon continent for a while, Rudius. Do you know where that is? Not off the top of my head. I think you said it's close to Bigoya region, maybe. I've never been myself, though. The two of us were on good enough terms now that we actually had some casual conversations during our study sessions. But for some reason, Norn mostly just wanted to discuss Regard. I guess he was our main common interest. Not that I really minded, you know. I was actually happy to have someone else I could talk to about him. I see. Sorry to keep pestering you, but what's the demon continent like in general? Well, all the monsters that live there are really big. The culture's pretty different, also, but it has some similarities with this region, actually. Most of the people there are just ordinary folks, living ordinary lives. I did notice that Norn still spoke to me a little stiffly. Her tone tended to be kind of overly polite, especially for a little sister talking to her own brother. Aisha and I had grown more informal with each other, but I guess Norn felt more comfortable this way for now. Oh, that reminds me, Rudius. Did Richard ever tell you the story of his spear? Yeah, I'm never going to forget that one. Talk about a tearjerker. Absolutely. I hope he manages to realize his goal eventually. Same here. It was about that time I moved that particular project forward, wasn't it? The general plan was to manufacture figurines of a spurred warrior and sell them bundled with a book. I hadn't given up on it by any means, but Julie was still inexperienced and didn't have much mana, so mass producing figures wasn't an option at present. Still, that didn't mean I couldn't get to work on a prototype at least. The book was another matter. The main issue there had been finding the time to write. I'd spent many hours over the last few months learning advanced healing and intermediate detoxification magic. I was good at the brute memorization those subjects required, but they still kept me very busy. At this point, I wasn't sure what I wanted to learn next. Moving on to advanced detoxification seemed logical, but there wasn't anything else that really caught my interest. It wouldn't hurt to get my fire and wind magic up to saintly level, but that tier of spells tended to involve dramatic manipulations of the climate rather than more practical spells you might use on a regular basis. Learning new things was always nice, but I wanted to focus on something more useful, maybe even a skill like horseback riding. As I was running the possibilities through my head, it occurred to me that I could take some of my newfound spare time and use it to work on my book about the spurred. I was looking to write a frank, straightforward summary of the tribe's tragic history. Prose wasn't my strong point, but I could probably pull something together if I really put my mind to it. Or so I told myself at first, but when I found myself staring at that first blank piece of paper, I couldn't even decide where to begin. Was it best to just write down the facts like a script of a documentary? Would it be more readable in the form of a diary? I often heard it said that you were better off starting with a small project for your first piece of creative writing, rather than trying to draft an epic masterpiece right off the bat. Maybe I should make this a booklet, no longer than 10 or so pages. It would be easier to yeah, it would be easier to hand that out with the figurines anyway. If I went that route, it was probably best to keep it simple and light. I could make it a basic good versus evil story where Lapras revealed as the true villain. Wait, wasn't Lapras considered a legendary hero on the Demon Continent, though? If I made him sound truly evil, I might piss off a lot of people. One afternoon, as I was struggling with these questions for the 100th time, Norn peered over at my work. What are you writing there, Rudius? I'm trying to put together a book about Regard's past, actually. The problem is, not sure how to approach the subject. Or, I'm sorry, not sure how to approach the project. subject, project, same thing in the sentence structure. Her interest was evidently piqued. Norn pulled my paper over and took a closer look at it. At the top was my working title, The Tale of the Great Warrior Regerd and the Persecution of His People. There was only about a page of actual text so far, mainly a quick outline of who Regerd was and what he was like. Of course, I was pretty biased, so he came out sounding kind of like a saintly hero. Is this all you have so far? Yeah, I haven't made much progress yet. The main issue was that I didn't know where to start the actual story or how to tell it. I still remembered Regerd's tales of his people's actions in the Laplace War, and I knew the basic story of their persecution afterward. Still, it had been several years since I'd heard these stories, so I was a little fuzzy on some of the fine details. In hindsight, I really should have taken some notes at the time. Would you mind letting me help out? Asked Norn tentatively. It was a very unexpected offer, but apparently Regerd had made a habit of sitting my sister on his lap every night, patting her on the head and telling her stories from his past. Not fair. I never got to sit on Regerd's lap. Okay, wait, let's try to be an adult about this. That would be a huge help, Norn. Just make sure you don't neglect your studies, okay? All right. From that day on, Norn and I started working on the project together. When she had a little extra time in between her lessons and her study sessions, she would use it to write down Regerd's stories. Her writing was a little childish at times and always had some rough spots, but for some reason, reading it made me remember Regerd so vividly that I often caught myself tearing up. It had a punch to it. The more I read of her writing, the more I started to feel like she might have some talent in this area. Again, I wasn't exactly an unbiased observer, but you do tend to improve faster when you're doing something you enjoy. If she kept at it long enough, maybe she'd blossom into a brilliant author someday. For the moment, though, I focused on fixing her minor mistakes and clumsy sentences. I was basically the team editor now. I had a feeling the book was going to turn out a lot better this way than if I'd tried to write it myself. While my relationship with Norn was beginning to improve, there had been a small development with Aisha, too. For once, it had nothing to do with Norn. The two of them still weren't especially friendly with each other, though Norn was being careful not to insult her sister ever since I scolded her for it. She was always at least superficially polite when her sister came to visit. That actually concerned me a little bit. I didn't want her to feel like she couldn't express her real thoughts at all. I was happy that Norn was starting to warm up to me, but that didn't mean I could neglect my relationship with Aisha either, and so I decided to give her permission to speak her mind. You know, Aisha, if there's something you want to say, you don't have to bottle it up inside. Could you be more specific, Rudius? Well, I don't know. I've been spending a lot of time with Norn lately, right? Maybe you're feeling a little attention starved or something? Maybe you've been working too hard and need a vacation? Maybe you want to spend the whole day in bed? Putting a finger on her chin, Aisha tilted her head to the side in puzzlement. Too cute. You're giving me permission to be selfish then? That's right. You can be a little selfish around me. There's no need to hold back. Well, one thing does come to mind. That mischievous smile on her face was setting off some alarm bells. What was she planning to demand? Hopefully not my body. Even as a joke, I'd have to make up an excuse to refuse, and then she'd probably be sulky for a week. I'd like a salary, please. Well, that wasn't what I'd been expecting. A salary? Now that I thought about it, though, I should have been working diligently as our maid for some time now. If anything, it was strange that we weren't paying her. But then again, we were family, right? She wasn't an employee. Maybe we could think of it like an allowance then. She was helping out around the house all day, so she wanted some extra pocket money. Fair enough. Okay, we could do that. I agreed to the general idea immediately, but we waited until Sylphie got back home to discuss the specifics. When I offered her, when I offered her a relatively large amount of money, though, she actually declined and tried to talk me down to a smaller figure. Talk about mature. Was this kid really only 10 years old? In the end, we settled on a number we could all agree on. Can I ask why you brought this up, though? Is there something you want to buy? I had to admit I was curious about what had prompted this request. Aisha could buy whatever she wanted, of course, but it couldn't hurt to know what it was. Well, a girl has her needs. Wow, that really clears things up. I was sort of hoping to hear what those needs are, kid. Are you that curious, brother dear? All right then. Why don't you come along on my next shopping trip? Oh, that sounded like a date. A date with my little sister. What a lovely concept. I did let Sylphie know about our plans in advance. Unfortunately, she was going to be working that day. I felt slightly guilty about running around town with another girl while my wife was at the office, but it's not cheating when it's your little sister. What was Aisha planning to buy, though? Hopefully, it wouldn't be a muscular slave or something. I didn't want some sweaty macho guy hanging around in my living room all the time, to be honest. It was bad enough having a six-armed monster randomly drop in for dinner. Not that he'd stop by in months. On the day of our date, Aisha led me to the market and headed straight for a general goods store that sold all sorts of miscellaneous everyday products. The shelves were stuffed with knickknacks, but there were no other customers to be seen. From the looks of things, they mainly sold secondhand goods. After browsing a little, Aisha bought 3 small flower pots there. What are you going to do with those? I asked. Drop them on the heads of any demon kings who happen to be passing. Drop them on the heads of any demon kings who happen to be passing by. Uh, no, I was going to plant some flowers in them, said Aisha, looking at me bashfully. As long as you don't mind, of course. There was only one possible way for me to reply to that. Of course I don't mind. Still, I hadn't really pictured Aisha as the flower girl type. I mainly thought of her as an energetic baby genius. In my mind, her hobbies were cleaning up, counting money, and balancing budgets. Growing plants was more of a slow, contemplative hobby. You had to let nature take its course, watching the results unfold over the course of weeks or months, and even a genius wasn't going to be 100% successful at growing things. But maybe that was exactly why it appealed to her. She was used to being able to manipulate things to her liking. This would be partially out of her control. Shouldn't you buy some potting soil too? I said. Uh, the earth around here isn't the most fertile, so it won't be easy to grow flowers in it. I was going to ask you to make some for me with your magic, Rudius, if you don't mind. She hit me with the pleading eyes again. There was only one possible reply. Of course I don't mind. I was a man, after all. The idea of digging around in the dirt and sowing some seeds held a certain appeal for me. I'd have to whip her up some amazing soil later. The kind that lets you grow boab trees with tulip seeds. What kind of flowers were you thinking of planting? I collected a bunch of different seeds on the way up here, actually. I'll use those. Those might not actually grow, just so you're aware. I think it'll probably be okay. The two of us puttered around in the store for a little longer, chatting about Aisha's plans. I picked out a pair of earrings for Sylphie before we left, shaped like teardrops, with little blue stones in the center. These would definitely look good on her. Is that a present for Sylphie? Yep. I'm the kind of man who doesn't take his wife for granted. Sylphie's a lucky woman, all right, but when she's busy, brother dear, maybe you could spare me a little love as well? Oh, the upturned eyes again. As always, there was only one possible reply. Not happening. The old man would beat me senseless. Darn. We paid for our purchases and left the little store behind. Our next stop was a place that specialized in the sale of fabrics and furnishings. There were big rolls of hand-woven cloth hanging all over the place. Princess Ariel had actually recommended this store to me a while ago, back when I was buying rugs for the house. They sold good quality stuff at a wide range of prices and seemed to attract a broad clientele. I didn't know how my sister had learned about it, though. Inside the store, Aisha quickly picked out some curtains that were pink and frilly and were definitely the expensive side. When she took them up to the counter, though, she proceeded to haggle ruthlessly with the clerk. She dropped my name and Princess Ariel's and used every single card she had to play. By the end, she'd managed to talk them down to only moderately pricey figures. You have enough to pay for those, Aisha? I can chip in a little if you want. That's okay, I've got exactly enough. Handing over the remainder of her allowance, Aisha completed her purchase. She'd used every coin of the money I'd given her. The girl had a real way with money. It was a little frightening, to be honest. It's a good idea to save a little bit of your pocket money for later, you know? I warned as we left the store. Unexpected expenses can pop up out of nowhere. Hell, you might get teleported to the demon continent for no apparent reason. I love that thought. Aisha is kind of worse than Rudy in ways. And here's the reason why Aisha is worse than Rudy. She's been around the nobility, the royalty, and they're way worse than Rudy. Like, Rudy's bad and he makes me cringe, but they are so much, they're beyond horrible. Just straight up. I recently read something in volume 16 that made me go, you know, if they horribly murdered that guy, mutilated his corpse, and we heard all the gory details, I wouldn't shed a tear or cringe or anything. I'd be like, yep, that's how I thought it'd play out. Asura nobility are fucking ridiculous. Also, I want to go ahead. Asura nobilities are not outliers. Asura nobility, the nobility and all that, they're not outliers, bro. No, they're not. Uh, Case in point, listen to what that little fucked up fat turd in Sharon wanted to do with Rudy's corpse. Not an outlier. And he wouldn't be thinking those things if things like that weren't happening around him as well. Aisha was only around Sharon. No, all the nobility is like that, bruh. All the nobility. Like, trust me when I say this. And uh trust me when Lilia says it, the Sharon kingdom, not all that different. Yeah, I was gonna say Pax comes to mind, that little fat turd. Anyway. Uh when he took them to the counter, or to haggle. Ever since that incident, I'd made a habit of hiding cash inside my clothes at all times. I even had a few bills in the soles of my shoes. Okay, I'll save a little next time. Still, flower pots and frilly pink curtains, huh? I really had taken Aisha for a little brainiac so far, but she clearly had a girly side. I've always wanted a few cute things like these, you know? She said. What, Lilia wouldn't buy them for you? Mom always said no. She thinks it's wrong for a maid to decorate based on her personal taste. I hope you don't mind, Rudius. The girl wasn't just clever, she was good at playing with your emotions. Not only had she wrapped her arms around my waist, she was looking up at me with Bambi eyes. I knew it was all an act, of course, but it was so cute I couldn't bring myself to care. There was only one possible reply anyway. It's totally fine, Aisha. Good thing I wasn't a creepy old man or anything. I might have kidnapped her on the spot. In the weeks following this little date, Aisha's room grew steadily more girly. It seemed to, she seemed to like cute, tiny things and kept finding small pots to plant small flowers in and lining up fist-sized dolls on her shelves. At some point, she even embroidered charming little designs on the hem of her apron. I was starting to get a little worried she might evolve into a gyaru at this point, if this kept going. Still, both my sisters were doing well. I was content. Although she wasn't my sister, Nanahoshi was finally getting her groove back too. In our last experiment, she managed to summon a plastic bottle. That bottle was currently sitting on the windowsill in her laboratory, serving as a vase for a single flower. With that success under our belt, we moved on to the second phase of her plan. From now on, we'll be trying to summon organic matter from our old world, she declared to me one afternoon. Organic matter? That's right. I was thinking we could start off with food. After my contribution to her recent success, Nanahoshi seemed a bit more inclined to trust me than before. She actually took the time to review the phases of her plan with me. Summon an inorganic object, summon something composed of organic matter, summon a living thing, a plant or small animal, summon a little living thing that fits certain specific criteria, return a summoned thing to its previous location. The plastic bottle we'd summoned previously might not technically be a fully inorganic object, depending on how you define the term, but she didn't seem to regard that as a major issue. Is that step with the specific criteria really that important? Well, I'd say so. When I'm teleporting myself back home, I don't want to pop back out in a foreign country or something. Basically, she wanted to get closer and closer to summoning something as complex as a human being and, at the very end, teleport herself back to Japan with pinpoint accuracy. Every step of the experiment was building up to a specific goal. At our current stage, she was already capable of setting some conditions on what she summoned. But these were fairly broad. The individual results would vary widely. For example, if she tried to summon a cat, she might get a tortoise shell female house cat, a spotted tomcat, a tiger, or a panther. Her research right now was focused on finding ways to make her spells more precise. She wanted to be able to summon a house cat, not just a feline, and even specify the exact kind of house cat that she wanted. Defining the conditions is quite tricky, though, she muttered, more to herself than me. Suppose I'll have to go see the old man again at some point. The old man was presumably the authority on summoning magic, who she'd mentioned once or twice before. Does this guy know a lot about this stuff? Conditional summoning? Well, Nanahoshi put her hand on her chin and thought for a moment, then nodded to herself and began to explain. Let me elaborate a little. In this world, summoning magic is generally divided between fiend summoning and spirit summoning. Really? Fiend summoning apparently referred to calling forth specific monsters. You'd summon an intelligent creature using a complex set of magic rules, pay it some form of compensation, and set it to work for you. This was the kind of summoning that people generally thought of when they used the word. Usually, this meant summoning garden variety monsters of the kind you might encounter in the wild. It was also possible, however, to summon legendary beasts believed to reside in other worlds. Nor was fiend summoning limited to living things. It was possible to target inanimate objects, too. Nanahoshi producing that plastic bottle would technically be categorized as fiend summoning spell. How do you even successfully conduct a returns experiment? Right? Someone on the other side calls. Hey, by the way, we made it. Oh, man. If I mastered this, I might be able to summon the panties Master Roxy was wearing. Way to ruin the mood, Rudy! Way to ruin the mood! Anyway, spirit summoning, on the other hand, was a very different kind of technique. This actually involved creating artificial entities out of mana. Designing these spells was apparently similar to programming in a way. Just so you know, it's best we don't discuss that part openly, she said. Why? Most people think that spirits are living things that reside in the barren world, and we're just called to them, and we're just calling them to ours. In other words, it was thought of as just another variation of fiend summoning. Fiends were harder to control, but they could think and act on their own, and they could adapt to unfamiliar circumstances. By contrast, spirits were quite easy to control, but usually only acted in a few set patterns. That said, if you had the programming chops, you could build some very complex code. You might be able to craft a spirit that could pass for human. She'd seen some of the aforementioned old man's place. And on a slightly different note, here's that magic circle I promised you earlier. Nanahoshi handed me a scroll. Oh my god, is the old man who I think it is? Is it Perugius? Is that who I'm thinking of? Without spoilers for why, just I think she's talking about Perugius. Nanahoshi handed me a scroll. There was a dense, complicated magic circle inscribed at its center, covering about half a page. What is this? A summoning scroll for a lamplight spirit. A lamplight spirit was a simple thing that would float along behind the summoner while emitting a bright light. It was capable of understanding simple commands like light up the area, but as time passed, its mana would dwindle until it disappeared. It was a very basic spell, but if you used enough mana, it could stick around for a relatively long amount of time. It wasn't the most exciting spell I'd ever learned. To be honest, I'd been expecting something a little flashier for my reward. This magic circle is an original creation that old man I keep talking about, by the way, Nanahoshi said. Not even the Magician's Guild knows about it. Huh? Really? When I heard it was a limited edition product, though, it suddenly seemed a lot more exciting. I guess I was still Japanese at heart. Yeah, and I'll get you something more impressive next time, okay? I promise. Nanahoshi pressed her hands together in a pleading gesture. I hadn't seen anyone do that in a long time. It made me a little nostalgic. I think you should be able to use your earth magic to make a template of that design, she said. That way you can print a whole bunch of copies. I'm sure the Magician's Guild would pay handsomely for them. You're okay with me selling copies? Won't the guy who made it get upset? Trust me, he's got bigger things on his mind. I doubt he'd even care. Well, it was good to know you didn't need to write out magic scrolls by hand every single time, at least. If you decide to sell them to the guild, make sure you mention my name, she said. That should ensure they don't try to rip you off. Got it. Thanks. I decided to file that idea away for now. It never hurt to have a potential source of income in your back pocket. In any case, the fact that these spirits were purely artificial was interesting. I felt like it might be relevant to Sonoba's project. By combining different principles of magic, maybe we could make ourselves a robot capable of saying "ha wah wah" every time it got flustered. Oh, by the way, Nanahoshi, if you can randomly summon objects from our old world now, is there a chance we could bring over some really useful stuff? It seemed like a decent idea on the face of it, but Nanahoshi shook her head. At this stage, I'm only capable of summoning simple objects composed of a single, consistent substance. Although I suppose that does give us a fairly wide range of possibilities. A single consistent substance, huh? That explains why the plastic bottle hadn't come with a cap or a label. But if she got better at setting her conditions, maybe we could summon complex objects piece by piece and then put them back together. Also, it's not a great idea to pull too many things that belong to our old world into this one. I think I mentioned this before, didn't I? Oh, she was still worried about that whole messing with the timeline thing? I feel like you're being a little too paranoid about that, honestly, I said. You're welcome to test that theory after I'm safely back home. I'd rather not take any chances. Wow, cold. Zenoba, meanwhile, had finally managed to finish up his red worm figurine the other day. It didn't look exactly like the one with uh I'd seen, what with the horns on its forehead and all, but it looked cool. And that was the most important thing. Julie was very happy with her belated present. She wasn't the sort of kid who smiled a lot, but she spent quite some time holding the figurine up, oohing and eyeing, and as she examined it from different angles. Thank you very much, Master. Thank you, Grandmaster. Turning around to face the two of us, she executed a slightly stiff but very respectable bow. You're welcome, Zenoba said with a lord. You're welcome, Zenoba said with a lordly nod. Keep up the hard work. Yes, sir, she replied happily. Julie was speaking the human tongue much more fluently these days. It wasn't because of anything I'd done, though. Ginger made a habit of correcting her when she slipped up, and you always learn faster when you have someone to point out your mistakes. Aren't you a lucky girl, Julie? Make sure you take good care of it, Ginger said. Yes, thank you too, Miss Ginger. Ginger was now a constant presence in Zenoba's room. She usually kept herself positioned by the wall, stepping out to fetch drinks for Zenoba or see to the needs of his visitors. At the moment, she was renting an apartment in the building close to the university. I'd once asked her why she didn't move into the empty room for bodyguards next to Zenoba's chambers, but she said it would be presumptuous of her to reside next door to the prince. Their arrangement felt less like a master-servant relationship and more like a very weird commuter marriage. Or maybe the bond between a cult leader and his most faithful disciple. The woman would probably cut her stomach open instantly if Zenoba ordered her to. You need something, Rudius. I was just wondering why you swore loyalty to Zenoba in the first place. Ginger nodded at my abrupt question, looking rather pleased. The prince's mother asked me personally to take care of him, and I swore in that moment to devote myself to his service. Well, that's nice. Go on. What do you mean? That's the story. Wait, that's it? That was enough to make you put up with all this? Then again, swearing an oath of fealty was probably serious business. If you were going to break that promise when you were treated poorly, you probably wouldn't make it in the first place. I'd once read in some manga that feudal society was composed of a few natural-born sadists and a great number of masochists. Maybe Ginger just fell into that second category. When I thought of it that way, it made a little bit more sense, although the reality was probably something not quite as crude. Cliff was making progress with his research, too. He'd recently completed his first prototype of a magical tool to suppress the symptoms of Alinalisa's curse. He announced this to me personally one day, looking even prouder of himself than usual. Essentially, it forces an external mana to counteract the flow of internal mana. It's not enough to eliminate the curse, but it slows it down. He went on to explain the details in complex technical language. A lot of it dealt with how he aligned the external mana with the frequency of the curse's mana in a very specific way. He also spent a lot of time emphasizing his own brilliance, so I think I'll omit that part. The bottom line was that he'd found a way to make Alinalisa's curse less severe. However, there are two remaining problems, he said. At this point in the conversation, Cliff finally let me see the device itself. It was a bulky loincloth of sorts, the kind of thing a sumo wrestler might wear. To be honest, I would have taken it for an adult diaper. I see. Well, the most obvious issue would be that it's not exactly fashionable. Indeed, I couldn't ask Lise to walk around wearing this thing, of course. The two of them had actually gotten into a fight about it, and they almost never fought. Lise had actually said she didn't care how it looked, but Cliff stubbornly refused to give in. I guess he was too proud to bear the idea of making his girlfriend look ridiculous. They'd made up over the course of a single passionate night, incidentally. Their love was as nauseating as ever. Zenobin Silent volunteered to help me out, and we've developed a plan to miniaturize the device. I'd like to make it significantly more effective, too, but I am a genius, so I'm sure it's only a matter of time. His ultimate goal was to make a device no larger than an ordinary pair of panties. It was hard to say if that was feasible, but if he did pull it off, maybe we could make a pair of gloves for Zenoba, too. It might give him a chance to make figurines with his own hands. Then again, I had a feeling he might just be naturally clumsy even without the super strength. So, what's the other problem you mentioned? Cliff frowned. That's actually the reason I called you here today, Rudius. Oh? The thing is, the implement currently consumes far too much mana to be practical. As I recalled, magical implements required someone to pump them full of mana before they could work. Less efficient ones were considered especially useful for the real-world application. Ideally, Cliff wanted something that Elinalise could wear constantly, while consuming only as much mana as she could stand to spare. But right now, the device was so thirsty for power that Cliff couldn't even keep it running for an hour. We're trying to keep honing the design, but I could really use your help. Without you, we'd only be able to charge the thing a few times a day. Ah, right. Okay, then. I'll help well when I can. Cliff considered himself a genius magician, and his mana capacity was certainly on the greater side. But even so, it wasn't close enough. This was exactly where I could come in handy. From that day on, I started to help out with Cliff's experiments, too. Incidentally, the device did nothing to make Elinalise any less horny. Lately, I felt like my life had settled into a smooth and pleasant rhythm. I woke up in the morning, did my training, ate breakfast, and went to the university. I stopped by to see Zenoba and then Cliff, checking in on the progress of their research, and occasionally offered some advice. After lunch, I headed over to help out Nanahoshi with her summoning experiments, and once classes ended, I took an hour to tutor Norn. On my way back home, I went grocery shopping with Sylphie, and Aisha greeted us at the front door. Sylphie and I took a bath together, and the three of us ate dinner. Then we practiced magic in the living room and talked about our days. After Aisha went to bed, I worked on the baby making project with Sylphie, then fell into a sound sleep with my wife as my body pillow. Each day went much like the one before it, but I still felt like I was making steady progress toward my goals. Maybe this was what happiness felt like. It wasn't something I'd gotten much of in my first try at life, but assuming Paul made it back safe and sound in a year or so, things should only get better from here. There we go, kids. Now shit gets crazy. The name of Chapter 7, The Third Turning Point. If you know what Turning Point 1 and 2 are like, you're in for some shit. All right. So for those who need a quick refresher, Turning Point 1 was when they got teleported to the Demon Continent and the Fatoa mana disaster took place. That was Turning Point 1. Turning Point 2 was meeting Orsted and everybody getting their ass kicked by him. We're starting Turning Point 3 next. Holy shit. Hope you guys are ready for that. I think that should be the title of our next episode, Turning Point 3. Turning Point 4 is going to be next volume 12. And then we're going to get Turning Point 5, I think, in volume 15. There's a lot of crazy shit that happens, dude. There's a lot of crazy shit. Though I would say it's the end of 14 / beginning of 15. It depends on how you want to view it. But yeah. It literally, the next chapter starts. Life comes at you fast sometimes. You ain't joking, Rudius. So here we go. Chapter 7 is the third, the third turning point. 8 is farewells. 9 is to Begarit. That's what we're looking at next. Then 10 is natural predator. 11 is desert ecosystem. 12 is the traversing the sands. 13 is bizarre. 14 is the warriors of the desert. Then we have an extra chapter in Norn in the Millis Church, and that's it. That's what we got. We are 43% of the way through. We're at 119 pages out of 275. Guys, next week we're going to read to chapter 9 or 10. Since there's almost 15 chapters in this book, we're going to be moving through them. As you can tell, we move through these chapters pretty fast. Pretty fast. 10 crunches, 10 push-ups, 10 squats, 10 jumping jacks, 10 heel touches, because I'm not doing Russian twists today. So we got 10 of everything. We got 10 of everything. Toby. Come here. Come here, Toby. Yes. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 10 push-ups. There's 10 jumping jacks, buddy. You want 10 squats? Come here. We're going to do it this way. I'm going to hold you. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And I'm going to set you down. Good boy. Good boy. Squats with Toby, everybody. Yeah. Okay, I need to. Yes. Good boy. How about I lay right here for a second? And there we go. 10 heel touches, Toby. 10 heel touches. Time for crunches, right? There's 10. And now, finally, for the 10 push-ups. There we go. 10 push-ups. There we go. 10. 10. Alrighty. Okay, so there we are. Got that going. Now it is time to head back to the library. Oh, I haven't made this one. Okay. 1 second, everybody. All right. And there we are. Whew. Give me a second. All right, so here is what we're looking at for the moment. uh, let's see. Let's move this over real quick. I'll take that. There we are. And I'll move that over. This there. There we go. Okay. So this is much easier. Hi guys. Hope you can. 16 is out. Yep, I was talking about that saying. Yeah, 16 is out. I read that one recently. So there it is. Content not in the web novel in there. Oh, that's sweet. There's a lot of good things that happen in there. Pretty cool. Plus, you get to have a field trip in which Sylphie and Eris are both along. So you get Sylphie and Eris time. It's pretty interesting. Can't go into more detail. So yeah. And let's see. I don't think it's this month, or I don't think it's next month, but in June, I believe we're getting 17. 17 is already up for pre-order if you want to get the 17 is up for pre-order if you want to get the physical edition. They have not released a digital release yet for when the next one's coming out, but it usually takes like a month to a month and a half earlier when it'll come out digitally. So yeah. All right, so stuff that is going on. As you can see, we're sitting here at volume 11. We've got 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 will probably be out before, we get caught up. So we'll probably read that one. But once we get caught up on Mushoku Tensei, we will start a new series. Now we can start Arifureta. Now here's the thing. I have 11 volumes. Volume 12 is the final volume. Volume 12 is coming out in, I think, July. All right. Also, timing well with the summer. Devil is a part-timer. I've got 6 volumes of that. I will eventually begin collecting more of that. Please also understand that when Mushoku Tensei drops a new light novel, we will stop whatever series that we're doing when we finish the next volume and move back to Mushoku Tensei. So I'm not going to be ignoring Mushoku Tensei. It's just we will go back to it. Probably not as soon as you would like, but we will be moving back to it. Hey, Toby, hi, buddy. You want to come up here? You want to come and look? Come on up. Come in. You ready? Yeah? There we are. There we are. Good boy. See, we're just looking at stuff. All right, so there's Mushoku. Okay, and then we've got Grimgar. I've got up to 9 volumes of Grimgar. I haven't read them all. I'm on volume 6 right now. So right here, this one. I've read 1 through 5. I will say, Grimgar is a dark series, and that's why I'm looking forward to that. If we get to do this one, it is kind of the dark and psychological thing that I thought Sword Art was going to be when it first came out. Like that, Grimgar definitely deals with that shit. If you die, you die for real. Okay, I probably need to add more. Here, take it, buddy. I need to do a little bit of changing around with this one, so give me a second. Okay, so how many books do I have in Realist? 6. Oh God, I have a lot more than that. Okay. Okay, so I have this, 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 and that. Okay, cool. So 15 in Realist. There we go. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so 15 in total. I have not read the last 2. Yeah, I haven't read the last 2 yet. But I have 15 in total. People die when they are killed. Light novel edition. I mean, yeah. We also have, need to get rid of that. 10 volumes of Reincarnated as a Sword. I know that's one coming up for the fall. And all of those could be working on that at the moment. So those are the series I have at the moment that we could jump into once we catch up with Mushoku Tensei, which is still a ways off because we're several volumes away. I know we go through about 3 chapters a week, but depending on how it goes, we may do 4 chapters a week. It all really depends on how fast I want to catch up to where we're at. So who knows? We may start doing 4 a week. 3 a week seems to put us in that nice 2 hour, hour and a half kind of range, because I've been kind of riffing for almost 20 minutes now. And in the beginning, I spent 30 minutes getting kind of prepped or letting stuff happen. So honestly, we were reading for maybe about an hour and a half for those 3 chapters. So I say we might start doing 4 chapters. I just don't want to go so long that I feel like my throat gets run raw or anything like that. But yeah, I just want you guys to see what the options are. And of course, it doesn't just have to be that. We've got Ruby books. I don't think I'm going to read Dune, but I might start doing more Full Metal Panic, because I really am enjoying that series, and I did not know that there was a light novel. Like, I've liked that series for a long time. There's Journey to the West, though I don't think I'm going to read that. And let's see. There's Spider. Yep. I'm not going to be picking that up. Oh, there it is. Log Horizon. We could probably pick up Log Horizon. We're only 4% of the way through that. So we will put up a poll about what I want to work on next for the light novel readings. We'll go from there. But I just wanted to let you know what kind of options you all had. So that being the case, thank you guys so much for coming by and hanging out with me tonight. I really, really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys maybe tomorrow with What the Fell. It depends on if Fell shows up. Or most likely, I will see you guys Monday for more Slime, as we're going to finish Chapter 2 of Slime. How do we vote on which series? YouTube? We don't know yet. It's going to be several months before we're even needing to. I'm just letting you guys know the options for now. We'll work that out at a later time. It may be that that patrons get to vote first. Who knows? That having been said, though, guys, thank you so much. We love you all and appreciate your time, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye for now. Say bye, Toby. Toby. No, come here. Come here. Yeah, say goodbye. Bye-bye, Toby. Okay, you saw him for like half a second.